When we look at how certain news organizations have portrayed, let's say, mass shooters, for example, and if they're white, they call them a lone wolf shooter, and they look into his history and say, well, you know, he was a good guy, and how black people are instantly portrayed as thugs, gangsters, beasts, monsters in the media.
Me, I have a big issue calling these protests political. To me, it's standing up for what is right. When you call something politics here, you think about the connotations, the negative ones, and of course people are like, yeah, let's keep politics out of sports. We're just here for the sports. But when we really get back to what these protests are about, people are protesting for equality. We're talking about police brutality that's disproportionate in black communities. We're talking about kids dying. We're talking about Trayvon Martin.
A lot of rules that have been put in place to completely disparage people and are discriminatory. For me, this conversation's already been started, and I rewound things to earlier this year when the New York Commission on Human Rights issued, a whole new guideline banning the discrimination of hair types, especially people of color. I feel like they profit on you being sick. And the EpiPen.
Yeah.
And it costs hundreds of dollars. If you have a child with severe allergies, that could save your kid's life if you can afford it. If you can afford your child's insulin. You're making it too expensive to afford basic health care in this country, and there's a reason why.
I will tell you that as someone who
does. And so when I see a lot of these influencers and they're advertising things like flat tummy tea, when we know that it's the liposuction that got you that little teeny bitty waist, and now you're saying, oh, now I'm in the gym, it's a flat tummy tea, and that's not true. And kids can fall victim to that because, of course, kids are on Instagram, and I don't like that. Because that flat tummy tea didn't do anything for you, honey. Don't play with
it. She was actually kicked out because of the hair extensions in her braids.
How'd you even determine that those are extensions? Do you have some teacher that's going up with a magnifying glass to see where the damn braid starts? And that's the part that really pisses me off. And because she's black, she can't have shoulder length hair. That's the part that's really going to enrage me. I always have to applaud native Spanish speakers because they come into this country where there is so much hatred and racism, and they have the courage to even try. But we get to criticize and we get to judge and say, speak better, I don't understand, your accent's too thick.
You say things like that, you come across as racist. But when we talk about people who are going out there saying no justice, no peace, talking about protests, you have to think about the history of this nation, and we talk about disparity in sentencing. And when you think about black people who've committed equal or lesser offenses as Amber Geiger and how long they've been sentenced, I think about a case that's been with me since I came here to Dallas, the murder of Jordan Edwards, a 15-year-old football player out of Mesquite who was killed by disgraced Balch Springs police officer who shot him in the back of his head, firing from his vehicle. And he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. And so a lot of people at times like this will ask, well, what if the situation was switched? What if it was a black man who fired shots because he feared for his safety? Would it have just been 15 years or would it have been 50 years? Because we've seen that far too often, and that's why we're seeing those protests, and that can't be ignored because there's a lot of hurt and disparity that stretches back hundreds of years in this country, and that's why you get protests like that. Perspective on this situation is, we were talking about it earlier in the show, there are so many people, white actors who've played people of color. I think about Christian Bale, one of my favorite actors of all time. He was cast as Moses. Moses is not white. I think about Laurence Olivier, if we take things way back. He played Othello in blackface. Scarlett Johansson, who played a Japanese anime character in Ghost in the Shell. We call that whitewashing in roles. It's called whitewashing. And so when I think about a mythical creature, a mermaid here, what's wrong with having a black girl playing that role? Let our imaginations grow beyond the ignorance here, people.